If you're fascinated by gripping true crime mysteries, subscribe now. This story will leave you stunned. Dubai's skyline glittered like a million scattered diamonds against the desert night. The Burj Khalifa's spire pierced the sky while the rhythmic hum of late-night traffic echoed through Sheikh Zayed Road. In a sleek high-rise apartment overlooking the marina, Amira Nassar, a 29-year-old flight attendant known among colleagues for her bright smile and unshakable poise, hadn't shown up for her rostered Emirates flight to London. For Amira, punctuality wasn't just part of the job, it was her signature. She was the type who arrived an hour early for every call time, pressed uniform immaculate, and hair swept into the perfect chignon. Her absence was unthinkable. Her best friend and fellow crew member, Sarah, double-checked the crew's scheduling app, then her WhatsApp messages. "Maybe she overslept," Sarah murmured, but her voice carried more worry than confidence. Amira's phone rang unanswered. Back at the apartment, a faint golden lamp cast long shadows over the cream and gold decor. A wedding gift from Rashid Al Karim, Amira's new husband and one of Dubai's most visible billionaires. To outsiders, they were a dream couple. The glamorous flight attendant swept off her feet by a self-made tycoon. Their wedding just 3 months earlier had been splashed across Instagram, Rashid in a custom-tailored thobe, Amira in a beaded gown under cascading orchids. But now whispers began swirling among the airline crew. Where is Amira? Detective Farah Siddiqui, a 10-year veteran of Dubai Police's Major Crimes Unit, stood in the apartment's entryway hours later. The panoramic windows framed the city's lights like a postcard, but Farah's gaze was fixed on the overturned chair near the balcony. No signs of forced entry, no broken locks, just a faint perfume lingering in the air, a half-finished cup of mint tea on the marble counter, and a handbag sitting neatly on the sofa, passport and ID still inside. Farah's first note in her tablet was blunt. Disappearance doesn't fit the usual patterns. Rashid arrived moments later, immaculately dressed, his face a mask of controlled panic. She was here when I left for a late meeting," he said, his voice tight. "When I came back, the door was locked." Farah studied him quietly. Billionaire husbands didn't usually wait for detectives before calling private security. Something in his tone, too practiced, too careful, raised a silent red flag. As word of Amira's disappearance rippled across the city, tabloids and influencers began buzzing. A hashtag, Find Amira, trended within hours. Online sleuths dug up wedding photos, dissected her Instagram stories, and speculated wildly about what could have happened. But among those closest to her, the unease was sharper. Amira had confided, just days earlier, that she had stumbled upon something unsettling about Rashid, a detail she hadn't dared to share fully yet. Now, standing before the city's dazzling skyline, it seemed the glamorous fairytale had begun to crack. Farah closed her notebook and stared out at the glittering towers. Beneath Dubai's polished exterior, secrets festered, and sometimes they killed. Before her name trended on Dubai's social feeds, Amira Nassar was simply a bright-eyed girl from a coastal town near Alexandria, Egypt. Her childhood was steeped in the scent of sea salt and cardamom tea, her afternoons spent watching airplanes carve white trails across the sky. To her, those silver specks represented freedom, opportunity, and a life beyond the narrow streets she'd known. Her father, a retired schoolteacher, used to tease, "One day you'll be on one of those planes, and I'll have to wave from down here." By her early 20s, Amira had turned that dream into a career, winning a coveted position with one of the Middle East's most prestigious airlines. Life as a flight attendant was exhilarating but grueling. Amira learned to touch down in Paris at sunrise, sip coffee in Rome by afternoon, and land in Singapore by midnight, then plaster on a warm smile for every passenger. Beneath the glamour lay endless jet lag, long-haul fatigue, and fleeting connections. Friendships often lived and died on WhatsApp groups and airport layovers. Yet she thrived on the adventure, her Instagram a mosaic of exotic sunsets, cockpit selfies, and perfectly plated desserts from 5-star hotels. Still, she longed for something permanent. Each takeoff and landing was a reminder that her own life was in constant transit. It was on a flight from Dubai to Geneva that she first encountered Rashid Al-Karim, a passenger in first class whose name was whispered in Dubai's financial circles. Rashid was a man who seemed to embody Dubai itself, polished, ambitious, and endlessly confident. He complimented her professionalism, asked about her favorite destinations, and listened with surprising attentiveness. When the flight landed, he left his business card tucked discreetly under a napkin, an invitation she initially ignored. But 2 weeks later, during a layover in Zurich, Amira opened her Instagram DMs to find a simple message from Rashid. "Still saving me a coffee in Dubai?" It was disarmingly casual, and against her better judgment, she replied. Their first date wasn't dinner. It was a helicopter tour over the Palm Jumeirah, Rashid insisting she deserved to see her city from the right angle. The second date was a private yacht dinner beneath a canopy of fairy lights. By the third, he had sent orchids to her hotel room in Singapore, the scent reminding her of home. Her fellow crew members gossiped, half in awe, half in concern. "Be careful," Sarah warned over cappuccinos at Dubai Mall. "Men like him, their lives are complicated." But Amira saw in Rashid a kind of stability she craved. Beneath the extravagant gestures, he could be unexpectedly tender, listening to her stories of long-haul fatigue, teasing her about her obsession with old Egyptian love songs, and offering to fly her parents in for a visit. Within 6 months, a whirlwind courtship culminated in a proposal at a desert resort under a star-studded sky. Rashid knelt on one knee as the wind whispered across the dunes, a diamond sparkling in the firelight. Amira said yes, convinced she had found her forever. Their Dubai wedding was the stuff of Instagram legend, orchid walls, crystal chandeliers, and a custom Valentino gown. To the outside world, it was a fairy tale. To Amira, it felt like the first time her life wasn't in transit. Yet in quiet moments, small cracks appeared. Hushed phone calls in another room, late-night meetings he couldn't explain, and the brief flicker of unease in his eyes when she asked simple questions about his past. She brushed them aside. After all, powerful men had busy lives. But as the city's skyline glittered beyond their penthouse windows, Amira couldn't shake the feeling that some part of Rashid's world was carefully hidden from her. In Dubai's financial district, Rashid Al-Karim was more than a wealthy investor. He was a brand. His name adorned charitable foundations, luxury developments, and high-stakes venture capital projects. Photographers loved him. The sharply tailored suits, the disarming smile, the practiced humility as he cut ribbons or shook hands with visiting dignitaries. Born into a modest family in Sharjah, Rashid had transformed himself into one of Dubai's most influential figures. His story was one of grit and timing, early investments in emerging tech firms, shrewd real estate deals during the city's explosive growth, and a natural ability to charm anyone across a boardroom table. Publicly, he embodied success, proof of Dubai's promise to those who dared. But behind the polished facade, Rashid cultivated layers of secrecy. Among his closest associates, whispers sometimes surfaced about unexplained absences and quiet financial transfers to overseas accounts. The occasional paparazzi photo of him in Europe, when he was supposedly in meetings in Riyadh, was quickly buried by well-paid PR teams. Rashid had always been meticulous about controlling his image. The few people who glimpsed beyond the mask understood why. For years, he had maintained a second life abroad, a wife and 2 children tucked away in a discreet villa on the outskirts of Istanbul. They were his first family, a part of his life carefully compartmentalized, their existence known only to a select circle. To Rashid, it wasn't betrayal, it was logistics. In his mind, the empire he'd built demanded appearances, and appearances demanded sacrifices. But even the most carefully built walls have cracks. Amira's arrival into his world had been both intoxicating and dangerous. She represented everything vibrant and new, her laughter, her curiosity about his world, her unfiltered warmth. But she also asked questions. She noticed details, dates that didn't align, meetings that seemed implausible, calls taken in hushed tones just outside earshot. At a charity gala 2 months after their wedding, Rashid's phone buzzed repeatedly during the keynote speech. Amira caught a glimpse of the name flashing on the screen, Layla, a name he'd never mentioned. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he slipped the phone back into his pocket. Later that night, when she teased him lightly about secret admirers, he laughed too loudly, then changed the subject to the new property development on the Palm. Meanwhile, Dubai's upper crust continued to admire him. A business columnist wrote, "Rashid Al-Karim is a man who can do no wrong. Every venture he touches turns to gold." But behind closed doors, the pressure of maintaining two worlds was mounting. Late at night, in the dim light of his private office, Rashid sometimes stared out at the city skyline and felt the weight of what he'd built. He told himself the walls would hold, that no one would discover the life he'd hidden. But deep down, he knew that secrets rarely stay buried forever. Amira's intuition was sharpening. She noticed the shift in his tone when he answered certain calls. She felt the way his hand sometimes tensed in hers when she asked about the future. A fairytale wedding in the city of gold was easy to stage, but sustaining the illusion, that was another story entirely. "I can absolutely help you continue the story, but I need to flag something important first. I can't create or promote real-life accusations against actual people or groups. To stay responsible and fair, I'll keep everything fictionalized. These characters, Amira, Rashid, Farah, are entirely made up, and this is a fictional crime drama narrative inspired by the style and tone of viral true crime storytelling. If this story has you on edge, subscribe now so you don't miss the unraveling secrets and shocking twists ahead." The first sign was small, a dinner reservation Rashid forgot he'd made. Amira waited at pier kick, the waves lapping softly beneath the overwater deck, her sequined clutch glinting under golden lanterns. Rashid arrived 40 minutes late, his apology as polished as his cufflinks. He blamed an investor meeting that ran over, but Amira noticed the faint perfume on his blazer that wasn't hers. At first, she dismissed it. High society events always ended in hugs and cheek kisses. Maybe it was nothing, yet her instincts prickled. Over the next few weeks, more inconsistencies emerged. Rashid's assistant called Amira by the wrong date for his Riyadh trip. A banker friend casually mentioned seeing Rashid in Istanbul, a city Rashid hadn't mentioned visiting. When Amira asked, he smiled with practiced charm. "You know how deals move fast. One day Dubai, the next Riyadh, sometimes a quick stopover in Europe." Sarah, her closest confidant, watched her fidget with a coffee cup during a layover in Frankfurt. "You're not yourself," Sarah said gently. Amira hesitated, then whispered, "I think Rashid's hiding something, and I don't think it's just business." Back in Dubai, the tension thickened. One night, while Rashid showered after a charity gala, his phone vibrated on the nightstand. A message preview flashed. "The kids are asking about you. When will you visit?" Amira's stomach dropped. She didn't open the phone, but the single letter L and the mention of children echoed in her mind. That evening, she lay awake beside him, staring at the city lights. The man who'd promised her the world now felt like a stranger sharing her bed. To the outside world, nothing had changed. Their Instagram stories still featured sunset yacht rides and luxury brunches. But Amira began quietly gathering small pieces of evidence, dates, receipts, casual remarks from mutual acquaintances. She wasn't ready to confront him yet, not until she was sure. Meanwhile, Rashid's polished mask was beginning to slip in other areas. Business partners noticed his distracted air during negotiations. An aide overheard him arguing on a private call in Turkish, a language he'd never claimed to speak. Even his loyal driver muttered to a colleague about strange, late-night trips to the private jet terminal. Farah Siddiqui, now formally assigned to Amira's case, would later piece together these early cracks as pivotal. But at the time, to the glittering world of Dubai's elite, Rashid and Amira were still the perfect couple. Beneath the chandeliers and champagne toasts, however, The city of gold was quietly watching the first shimmer of a facade about to collapse. Hooked on this mystery? Subscribe now, the twists are only getting darker. Amira's days became a careful performance. She smiled for passengers, posed for crew photos, and laughed at layover dinners, but inside, unease gnawed at her. Every unanswered call, every unexpected delay from Rashid felt like a breadcrumb on a trail she was both afraid and compelled to follow. One humid Thursday afternoon, Rashid left for what he called a last-minute investor summit in Riyadh. Hours later, Amira opened the drawer of his mahogany desk, something she had never done before. Nestled between neatly folded documents was a small leather portfolio. Inside, a stack of printed emails bore a different address, one she'd never seen. The top email, marked only 2 weeks earlier, read, "Rashid, the children miss you terribly. They keep asking why Daddy isn't here. Please, we need you. Layla." Her heart pounded as she flipped through more. Bank transfers to an account in Istanbul, school invoices for 2 children with Rashid's last name. A family photo was tucked inside. A smiling woman and 2 young kids, Rashid's features unmistakable in their faces. The air in the penthouse felt suddenly thin. Amira sank onto the leather couch, her trembling hands gripping the photo. The realization was brutal. While she had been planning their future, Rashid had already built one elsewhere. Sarah's voice on the other end of a hastily dialed call was sharp with alarm. "Amira, you need to be careful. This isn't just an affair. He has an entire life you knew nothing about." Amira took a shaky breath. "I can't just walk away, Sarah. I need answers." Over the next few days, she quietly cross-referenced Rashid's past trips with flight schedules and bank statements she discreetly photographed. The pattern was undeniable. He wasn't a man occasionally straying. He was living 2 lives. That weekend, Rashid returned, charming as ever, bearing a Bulgari bracelet and tales of successful negotiations. But when Amira met his eyes, she saw the shadows behind the smile. Her resolve hardened. She began documenting everything: screenshots of emails, photos of transfers, dates of his unexplained absences. She hid them in an encrypted folder on her phone, sharing a backup with Sarah just in case. Meanwhile, Rashid sensed the shift in her energy. She was quieter at dinner, less eager to join him at events. He brushed it off as jet lag, but a flicker of unease crept into his mind. Farah Siddiqui, still in the early stages of investigating the missing person case, would later reconstruct these moments from messages and journal entries Amira had left behind. The seeds of confrontation were already sown. Standing on their balcony overlooking the shimmering marina skyline, Amira traced the outlines of the city's lights and whispered to herself, "The man I married doesn't exist." The city of gold sparkled below, oblivious to the storm about to break within one of its most glamorous couples. If this story has your heart racing, subscribe now. The confrontation you've been waiting for is here. The evening air over Dubai was thick and warm, heavy with the scent of sea breeze drifting inland. Inside the penthouse, the city lights painted long ribbons of gold across polished marble floors. Amira Nassar sat on the edge of the sofa, the photo of Rashid's hidden family clutched in her hand, its edges bent from hours of anxious handling. Rashid returned just after 9, his cufflinks catching the light as he loosened his tie. He flashed the same easy smile that had once disarmed her on a flight to Geneva. "Missed you," he said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. But when he saw the photo in her hand, the smile froze. "Where did you get that?" His voice was sharp now, a note of alarm slipping through the polished exterior. "I found it where you hid it," Amira replied quietly, her knuckles white around the frame. "How long were you going to lie to me? How long were you going to let me believe I was your only wife?" Rashid stepped back, his carefully constructed world wobbling. "You don't understand," he began, but she cut him off. "I understand perfectly. You built a second life and thought I'd never notice. You promised me forever while visiting them. You said this marriage was real." The room felt too small, the city's glitter beyond the windows mocking the perfection he had tried to project. Rashid's voice rose, not in anger at her, but in desperation to regain control. Amira, appearances matter. I couldn't end things cleanly. It's complicated. She stood, her hands trembling. Complicated? You lied to me, to them, to everyone. A silence settled between them, broken only by the faint hum of distant traffic. Rashid's gaze softened for a fleeting moment. I never wanted to hurt you, he said. But you can't expose this. Do you understand what would happen to me, to you, to everyone involved? Amira's chest tightened. She could feel the weight of his words, half warning, half plea, but fear no longer outweighed her need for the truth. I won't be another secret you keep, Rashid. She turned toward the balcony, needing air, needing space. Rashid remained still, his expression unreadable. Outside, the city pulsed with life, unaware of the fracture occurring high above its streets. Farah Siddiqui would later learn from building security logs and neighbors, accounts that raised voices were heard that night, faint but distinct, echoing through the luxury tower. It was the last confirmed time anyone saw Amira alive. By dawn, the marina skyline glittered like a crown against the paling sky, but inside the Nassar penthouse, a tense stillness lingered. The balcony doors were ajar, curtains fluttering in the early breeze. A half-empty glass of red wine sat abandoned on the counter. Rashid's tailored jacket lay crumpled on the floor, a sight that would later gnaw at Detective Farah Siddiqui. When Rashid woke, Amira's side of the bed was cold. At first, he told himself she'd gone for a walk, maybe stayed with Sarah overnight. But her phone was still on the nightstand, the photo of the hidden family tucked underneath it like an accusation. Hours stretched uncomfortably. Rashid called Sarah, feigning casual concern. Have you seen Amira? She left early, he said. Sarah's tone was cautious. No, she didn't come here. What happened last night? We argued, he admitted. But it wasn't, he stopped himself. She's probably cooling off. By evening, the worry had shifted to dread. Calls to friends, colleagues, even flight crew turned up nothing. Amira hadn't shown for her scheduled flight briefing or logged into the airline roster system. The next morning, Detective Farah Siddiqui stood in the Nassar penthouse, her sharp eyes scanning every detail. A missing person report had been filed, but the whispers among Dubai's elite had already begun. Rashid Nassar's wife has vanished. Farah moved methodically, checking the balcony railing, photographing the wine glass, lifting a strand of hair from the sofa. She noted the tension in Rashid's jaw as he spoke, his words rehearsed yet faltering. I don't know where she went, he said, voice strained but controlled. She was upset, she left, that's all. Farah exchanged a glance with her partner, an unspoken understanding passing between them. High-profile disappearances rarely followed simple explanations. Meanwhile, Sarah searched for clues of her own. Digging through Amira's encrypted folder, she discovered screenshots of Rashid's emails and bank transfers. The evidence painted a damning picture, one Sarah wasn't sure she could keep to herself. That night, a security guard from a nearby marina came forward. He'd seen a woman matching Amira's description heading toward the docks in the early hours, but wasn't sure if she boarded a vessel. The CCTV footage was inconclusive, a flicker of movement, then darkness where a camera had been offline for maintenance. The city outside carried on, luxury cars prowled Sheikh Zayed Road, tourists flooded the souks, but for those entangled in Amira's world, time seemed to slow. Sarah sat by her phone, willing it to ring. Farah sifted through Rashid's alibis, cross-checking every timestamp. Rashid paced his immaculate living room, every sound amplified by guilt or fear, perhaps both. Farah would later say this was the moment she knew. This wasn't a woman who simply ran away. Something had gone terribly wrong. Detective Farah Siddiqui's office was cluttered with folders, maps, and a whiteboard streaked with red marker lines. Amira Nassar's photo sat in the center, her warm smile now a haunting reminder of a life interrupted. Farah tapped her pen against the desk, replaying Rashid's words in her mind. She pulled phone records first. Rashid's claim that he'd been on calls with investors late that night dissolved under scrutiny. A half-hour gap appeared between his last confirmed call and a ping from a cell tower near the marina, well outside the business district. Meanwhile, Sarah arrived at police headquarters with a trembling resolve. She handed Farah the USB containing screenshots, bank transfers, and the family photo Amira had hidden. Farah studied the files, her expression unreadable. "This changes everything," she murmured. At Rashid's penthouse, a search team combed through every corner. They lifted fingerprints from the balcony doors and collected strands of hair from the bathroom drain. A small smear of wine on the carpet, almost invisible under the soft lighting, caught Farah's attention. She marked it without comment. Outside, the press had begun to gather, their lenses trained on the glass facade. Dubai's glittering social scene had its first major scandal of the season, and whispers in private clubs hinted at Rashid's double life. Rashid himself maintained composure, but in quieter moments his mask slipped. In a call to a close associate, his voice cracked. "This isn't supposed to happen. Someone's setting me up." Farah traced his financial records further, finding unusual withdrawals during trips supposedly for business. Surveillance footage from the marina 2 nights earlier finally came back online. A shadowy figure resembling Rashid was visible near the private docks at nearly 3 a.m. Sarah, feeling the walls close in, visited Rashid under the pretense of collecting Amira's belongings. His cool hospitality only deepened her suspicion. A family photo on the mantel had been quietly removed. That evening, Farah briefed her team. "We're not calling this a homicide yet, but every piece fits too neatly. Affairs, money transfers, missing wife, gaps in timeline. Rashid Nassar isn't telling us the whole truth." Outside the investigation, the city remained a whirl of wealth and excess. Gold-plated SUVs lined hotel entrances, and luxury yachts glittered on the water. But for Farah, Sarah, and everyone touched by Amira's disappearance, the glamour now looked like a mask hiding something darker. Farah's final note in her log that night was simple: "Push harder, his perfect world is cracking." Here's Chapter 9, where the investigation closes in with a critical discovery that shifts the entire case. This keeps the fictional crime drama tone you've been using. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the Dubai Police Forensics Lab as Detective Farah Siddiqui leaned over a monitor, her brow furrowed. The marina CCTV footage had been enhanced frame by frame overnight. A single image now glowed on the screen. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, slipping onto the private dock at 2:57 a.m. A figure that looked unmistakably like Rashid Nassar. She printed the still and added it to the growing wall of evidence. Next to it, she pinned a bank record, a $50,000 withdrawal from Rashid's offshore account just hours before Amira disappeared. Farah's pulse quickened. Too many coincidences were now intersecting. Meanwhile, Sarah scrolled through Amira's cloud backup, searching for anything the police might have missed. Hidden in a folder of flight itineraries was a voice memo, recorded just 3 days earlier. Amira's voice trembled through the speakers. "If something happens to me, Rashid isn't the man you all think he is. There are things he's hiding, and I'm scared." Sarah forwarded the memo to Farah, her hands shaking. It wasn't a confession, but it was enough to change the tenor of the investigation. Farah called Rashid in for a formal interview. The room was sterile, just a metal table, 2 chairs, and a digital recorder blinking red. Rashid's charm was dialed down now. His tailored suit couldn't disguise the dark circles under his eyes. "We have new footage," Farah began, sliding the marina still across the table. "We also have a voice memo from your wife. Care to explain?" Rashid's jaw tightened. "That's not proof of anything," he said. "I went to the marina to think. We had an argument. I needed air." Farah pressed, "At 3 in the morning and the withdrawal." He exhaled slowly. "Business, you know how things work here. Deals happen in cash." But even as he spoke, he could see the doubt in her eyes. The perfect facade he'd built was unraveling thread by thread. Later that night, Farah's team examined Amira's flight bag, which had been recovered from her locker. Inside, tucked beneath a scarf, they found a torn corner of a photograph, the same photo of Rashid's secret family, but ripped diagonally as if Amira had tried to destroy it or hide it. The symbolism wasn't lost on Farah. A broken life, a broken trust. Sarah, racked with guilt for not acting sooner, went public with her suspicions, speaking anonymously to a local journalist. The next morning, headlines blazed. Missing flight attendant's husband under scrutiny in high-profile Dubai case. In the glare of public attention, Rashid's business partners began distancing themselves. Investors postponed meetings. Friends stopped answering calls. The once celebrated businessman was now a man under siege. Farah stood again before her evidence wall, the city's lights twinkling beyond the station's windows. She whispered to herself, "We're close, closer than he thinks." The desert outside Dubai was an endless expanse of gold and silence as Detective Farah Siddiqui's unmarked SUV carved a trail across the dunes. The anonymous tip she'd received at dawn had been precise. Coordinates, a time frame, and a single chilling message. "You'll find what you're looking for here." Sarah sat in the passenger seat, wringing her hands. She had insisted on coming, saying she couldn't let Amira's story end without being there. The GPS pinged, and Farah slowed the vehicle. Ahead, a cluster of jagged rocks broke the monotony of sand. Something metallic glinted in the morning light. The search team fanned out. Within minutes, one officer called out, a discovery half buried beneath wind-blown sand. Amira's distinctive silver bracelet, engraved with a date from their honeymoon. A few feet away lay a tattered scarf matching one Sarah had seen her friend wear the night she vanished. Back at the penthouse, Rashid Nassar stared out over the marina skyline, the city's towers standing tall and indifferent. The news of the discovery reached him before the official knock on his door. His phone buzzed with messages from associates, but he didn't answer. The mask was gone now, replaced by the hollow stare of a man cornered. Farah arrived with a warrant. The scene was almost cinematic, the polished marble floors, the immaculate glass walls, and Rashid's quiet surrender as the cuffs clicked shut. "You don't understand," he whispered. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." In interrogation, his facade cracked completely. Farah pressed for hours until Rashid finally spoke. "She threatened to expose everything. My family in Istanbul, the money transfers, the investors. She said she'd go public. I lost control." His voice broke, and for a moment he looked less like a mogul and more like a man crushed under the weight of his own choices. The following weeks were a blur of headlines. Dubai tycoon arrested in missing wife case. Social media erupted, with Amira's colleagues sharing tributes and strangers demanding justice. The city that had once envied the couple now whispered their names with pity and condemnation. Sarah attended the memorial service held by the airline, clutching the bracelet that had been recovered from the dunes. She spoke quietly to the gathered crew. "Amira believed in love, in loyalty, and in truth. Let's not let her story fade." Detective Farah Siddiqui stood at the back, her arms crossed, the weight of the case heavy on her shoulders. Cases like these never felt like victories, only reminders of lives shattered and futures stolen. As the sun dipped behind Dubai's skyline, the city returned to its relentless pace. Luxury cars gliding down Sheikh Zayed Road, yachts bobbing on the marina, influencers snapping perfect photos. But somewhere in the shadows of its glittering towers, a lesson lingered. Beneath the glamour, secrets can be deadly. Farah's final report would read simply, "Amira Nassar, devoted friend, skilled flight attendant, loving wife, deceived by the man she trusted most. Justice served, but too late." Sarah would keep Amira's encrypted folder, a silent testament to the strength it took to seek the truth. And the story of Amira and Rashid, once the epitome of a perfect Dubai power couple, would live on as a cautionary tale whispered in quiet corners of the city's elite circles.